Hi and welcome to Stories from My Drinking Days. My name's Harry Fell and I'm the founder of No Low Cocktails and Bars. Today joining us we have Esther Nagle, who is a recovery coach for midlife misfits who want to have fun and remember it. Welcome Esther. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. Do you want to start off by telling us sort of when you started drinking? Do you remember your first drink?
Not the first one, but I know that when I started going to a local kind of Friday night indie kind of disco when I was 16. I'm amazed my parents allowed me to do it, really, but I figured that they kind of figured I was probably going to go out drinking anyway, so they may as well allow me to do it. And I would drink 2 halves, I think, of cider and black.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 halves and get nicely tipsy. I never got drunk then. I very rarely got drunk then anyway. But yeah, so I remember I was always, it was just a nice, easy on a Friday night. And then I started going out on a Saturday night and it was just fun then, back in those days, it was just fun. It meant that I could talk to boys. I did have a boyfriend, but I could talk to other boys as well, which I struggled to do when I was sober. And yeah, it was just for that sort of nice, gentle buzz. I got to that point then. Didn't discover oblivion for a couple of years. But then I did discover drinking for oblivion. And a couple of years later, I'd been a bit of a misfit at school for various reasons. And when I was 19, I met a load of people who hadn't gone to my school, who didn't know me from school, didn't know all the baggage of the person that I was in school, the teacher's daughter and the weird little freak that I was in school. And so they just accepted me because they were all weird misfits from school as well, I think. They were all the odd bods in school and we just all became good friends. And they liked partying and they were into smoking weed and taking acid and speed and getting drunk. And I discovered the joys of drinking pints as opposed to drinking halves and getting very drunk. I started getting very drunk then and taking lots of drugs at the weekends. And then life kind of imploded. I made some catastrophically bad decisions that changed the shape of my life forever in a bad way. And then I sort of discovered that, if I drink enough, then I don't have to listen to what's going on in my head. I mean, it never worked because I always did have to listen to what was going on in my head. I just never really could make any sense of it. And I would end up frequently in floods of tears in the toilets, completely unable to cope with my emotions because I was so drunk by that point. But it started a bit of a habit then. Life was free falling and I ended up moving to a place. I went to college to try and sort of put my life back together again. After a couple of years of drinking and drugging, I thought, right, time to put my life back together. My mum had a car crash with my 2 little brothers in. And it was one of those like, oh my God, I got to make my life a bit better. And I went to college and I moved into this bed sit thinking if I moved away from where all my party friends were and created this new life for myself, then I would change my life. But there was more drinking and drugging going on in that bed sit than there was where I'd come from. So I actually plummeted deeper when I was living there. And it seemed like wherever I moved then, I found people who were drinking and drugging. And so my life just carried on being like that. And I mean, on the face of it, I was drinking socially. I was going out. I was meeting people and hanging out with people who like to take drugs, like to drink. But I was also doing a lot of it on my own in private as well. So for kind of 20 years, I was basically self-medicating a lot of unhappiness, real unhappiness, and a lot of real shame and self-loathing that I was carrying around with me, which of course I was making worse every time I got drunk.
Yeah.
I would do something that would make that worse as well. So it's just piling shame on top of shame on top of shame, and drinking to try and deal with it, but making it worse every single time. It's a bit of a cycle.
Yeah. So it's kind of a downward spiral, really, from
yeah. And because of the life that I was creating for myself, I had people around me who were drinking, who were doing all this. I was a big fan of, I still am, a big fan of the Fab Four up there. So they were renowned for their drinking, and they were big into the drug scene when they were at their peak of being the Beatles. So I had this kind of, well, all my heroes are doing it, so it's okay. You can't listen to the Beatles if you're not stoned kind of attitude. Which after 9 years of still loving the Beatles, I know now is complete nonsense. But from my vantage point, my behavior was normal. And it was actually, I was living the life that I wanted. I was living this rock and roll life, I thought. I told myself, I knew I wasn't really, but I told myself that I was kind of like this hard partying rock chick, when actually I was just a really unhappy drunk, really.
Yeah. So can I just ask, your mum and your brothers, were they okay after the car crash?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, it could have been a very bad accident, and it was. They were fine. They were fine. Shaken up, very emotionally shaken up, but physically fine.
Yeah. So having made the move then to college and that not working out for you, what did you do after college? Did you?
Well, I ended up getting a job with my dad. My dad was a wholesale greengrocer, and one of his customers was selling their mobile fruit and veg business. So he bought that and gave me a job, which stopped me going. I mean, I was applying for universities at this point, and the one that I really wanted to do was music management, because I really love the idea of hanging out with bands and being in. I'm a wannabe musician and a wannabe rock chick. So I wanted to be in the music industry somehow. And then Dad offered me this job, and I was on income support, and I was broke, and I was fed up of being broke. So I thought, yeah, great, get a job. So I didn't end up going to university, which with hindsight was probably a good idea, because I think a grant in my pocket at that point would have probably been catastrophic. So I got this job working for my dad. Didn't do very well at running that business for him. But I ended up meeting the father of my son, Liam, and I got pregnant. He was in a band, and quickly learned that maybe hanging out with band members isn't always as, they have priorities that don't necessarily involve your children. So it wasn't great. And then when we split up, I went to university properly this time and did a teaching degree. But it was there that I started really drinking on my own a lot, because I was lonely. And I was far from my friends. I was a single mom in university, surrounded by people who were like 4 or 5 years younger than me, who were going out having fun, when I was at home watching Thomas the Tank Engine and putting my son to bed at 7 o'clock, and then on my own trying to do my coursework. So I was really lonely, and I was really unhappy, and it was really hard. And I had a lot of problems with my ex, and it was a challenging time. And by the time I came back out of that, and I moved back home to where my original party friends lived, because I was so stressed by the end of it that I just needed to come back somewhere where I had people around me who I knew and who knew me, and my parents were here, and I moved to where there was support. I thought I was coming back for 6 months. That was with a 4-year-old child. I still live here, and he's now 26. So it didn't quite work. I was, the plan was I was going to come back home, decompress a little bit, and then go off in search of work as a teacher. But I mean, I did 2 terms of being a supply teacher, and being a supply teacher as a single mum was really challenging. So I couldn't be a teacher. I couldn't have done it without the support network that I had.
Yeah.
So I couldn't possibly go and be a full-time teacher and a single mum somewhere else. It would have been impossible. So I stayed.
Yeah. And so what did you do after the teaching then? After you decided teaching actually wasn't the thing?
Then I went and I remember this day. I'd written up a CV, and I had a lot of CVs that I'd photocopied. And I was about to go and take all these CVs to shops. Because of my dad, I've got lots of retail history. You know, I've got lots of retail experience. I've worked for Dad on and off for years. So let's get a job in a shop. And I was driving to drop all these CVs off in all these shops. And I suddenly think, I don't want to do this. This is not, I've spent 4 years training to be a teacher so I can avoid working in shops, because I didn't want to work in shops. And then I saw an open day sign for the local college. So I went and I enrolled on a HNC in computing and did some IT courses, which it turned out I was quite good at. So then I spent the next 10 years in various IT related roles, doing like system support and data management and website admin sort of roles. And then in 2013, I had this fairly spectacular breakdown, which I maintain I'd been waiting for at least 15 years. And I gave up the job that I was in at the time, which I'd been in for 7 weeks. I'd only been there for 7 weeks, and I knew I was going to lose the job because I was having all kinds of issues going on at the time. It was a fairly terrible year on many levels. And I had this massive breakdown and decided to quit the job, go back on income support, so go back full circle to where I was when I was 20. And then I ended up training to be a yoga teacher. And it was through the yoga teacher training, that I ended up getting sober. Totally unexpected. Didn't know that would happen. If you told me when I started that I would end up 6 months sober by the time I finished, I wouldn't have done it. There's no way I thought that was going to be a positive outcome from it. But I came out of that 6 months sober, and really happy to be 6 months sober as well. It had been like quite a joyful journey into sobriety. Very unexpectedly so, because I tried to, I knew for a long time that I had some issues with my drinking habits, and I tried to control my drinking in the past. I tried to stop, I tried to manage it, and it never worked. And it was just doing it through yoga, with what I learned through yoga teacher training, just made it almost effortless.
So you obviously started your yoga teacher training, and then how did that lead to you deciding to give up alcohol completely?
So I was, I learned how to breathe. I think that's one of the main things, is I learned how to breathe properly. And that gave me a way to calm my emotions down, to soothe myself in those moments when I would have previously gone, I am so stressed, I need a drink. I was able to just take a few breaths and calm myself down. So I didn't actually feel that level of anxiety and that level of stress. I did an awful lot of writing, a lot of kind of free writing, where I was really diving very deep into my psyche. And it was like I went to some dark places through this writing. And I kind of healed. I basically did therapy on myself for 6 months. I think essentially my yoga teacher training allowed me to do an awful lot of healing through physically as well, through, embodiment, being in my body and changing my relationship with my body. So I was starting to appreciate what it did for me and starting to have more care for it. So I was learning to breathe. And then I was going to the pub at the weekends, or having my friends round, or drinking and smoking. And I was suddenly very aware of what I was doing to my body when I was drinking and smoking. I stopped drinking during the week because I wanted to be able to do my morning yoga practice. And so I wouldn't drink in the week, most weeks. I did sometimes, but most weeks. And then at weekends, it was almost like I felt like I had to make up for lost time. So I was drinking lots at the weekends. And then I was getting hangovers for the first time ever. I'd never had hangovers before, because when you drink like every other day, if not every day, you don't get the hangovers. I was just like constantly exhausted. And I started getting these really awful hangovers. So it was like, I was sort of appreciating what being sober felt like. And then my body was showing me what the consequences of drinking were. And on the 12th of October that year, I had the worst hangover. I stayed up. I drank like everything. I drank everything that was in the house. I drank the remainder of my friends' drinks. I drank whiskey. I drank everything. It was awful. And then the hangover that I had the next day was so bad. I couldn't get off the sofa all day. I was in so much pain. I couldn't open my eyes. I was really unhappy. And I'd had all these things I wanted to do that day, and I couldn't do any of them. And all I could do was think. And I was just like thinking, yesterday morning when I woke up and I didn't have a killer hangover, I was able to get up and do things and I had a good day. Today, I can't. And I was very conscious of the fact that I no longer needed to drink. Whereas before I'd been drinking mainly about managing my emotions because I couldn't deal with my emotions. I wanted to just not, I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to feel what I was feeling. But through yoga, I was able to feel my feelings. I was able to process them. I was able to actually tolerate not feeling good. So I've sort of realized, well, all the reasons that I've had for drinking in the past actually aren't there anymore because I've got this other thing. And so I didn't decide then that I wasn't going to drink anymore. But what I decided was that I wasn't going to do that to myself anymore. And so I made the decision, right, I don't drink in the week anymore because I'm doing my yoga. So that's fine. But I'm going to stay sober next weekend. And that was the difference in how I approached this was I'm going to stay sober rather than I'm not going to drink. My focus then was on, because it was that sobriety, being sober feels good. Being drunk feels bad. So I focused on being sober because that felt good. And so I was able to keep going with that. I'm staying sober, and I celebrated that. I turned it into a real positive thing. I would go to bed every night and I'd be thinking to myself, I'm going to remember doing this in the morning. I've just put my pajamas on. I haven't collapsed in my clothes. I've brushed my teeth. Yay! And all these little things that I was doing because I was going to bed sober, and I wasn't just passing out on the sofa or getting upstairs and collapsing on the bed on top of the duvet with my shoes still on. And then in the morning, I didn't have to lie in bed thinking, I wonder what I did last night then. I wonder who I sent a text to last night. I wonder what stupid thing I posted on Facebook last night that I'm going to have to delete. And I was able to just get up and do my yoga and get on with my day. And so celebrating those little things, just those little things, grew until it became that I didn't want to drink it. It wasn't even that I didn't want to drink. I wanted to be sober. I was really enjoying feeling good about myself for the first time in a long time. I was actually feeling like I was doing something really positive in my life. And then my brother got married in the November. So it was about 6 weeks of doing that. And I surprised the entire family by announcing that I was going to drink elderflower cordial that night and not the expensive red wine that was, when you just put your hand up and they come and refill your glass. So I could have got absolutely hammered that night. And it would have been easy and I wouldn't have even noticed I was doing it. And I didn't. I drank this really nice elderflower fizzy stuff. It was delicious. And then the next morning, I got up and I thought, I was able to look after Marcus, my 3-year-old. I was able to be there and not make a complete arse of myself. I had to travel back in the car with my parents. So had I got drunk, that would have been a really unpleasant experience because my mother would have been furious with me. They would have made lots of comments about the smell of red wine and cigarettes that was hanging over me. And instead, it was just a lovely journey home where we just talked about what a lovely day we'd had yesterday. And on that journey home, I told my family, I loved being sober last night, and that's how I want to live now. And that was when I made that final decision, like this. And it still wasn't, I'm giving up drinking. At no point has it been, I'm giving up drinking. I tell people now I don't drink, but it's not, I never thought about it as giving up drinking, because that had such a negative connotation to it. But choosing sobriety was so positive that it made it easy. I know that had I just decided that day I'm going to give up drinking, I would have been drunk the following weekend, because it never worked when I did that. Because, you know, when you tell yourself you're not doing something, especially because I got ADHD and I'm fairly like oppositional with it. If you tell me I can't do something, I want to do it. And it works when I'm telling myself as well. So if I tell myself I'm not going to drink, I'm going to drink. But if I tell myself I'm going to stay sober, I can embrace that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that different take on it.
Yeah, I think it made such a difference. It really, that's the secret to the success of it for me. I think is that reframing it.
Yeah. So then, did you become a yoga teacher?
I did. I taught yoga for a while. I still do teach yoga a little bit, but not so much anymore. COVID kind of finished that off. I was teaching some local classes, and then I did a bit online, but it just became harder and harder. And it never made me, I never made a living at it. It was a hobby that put a bit of pocket money in my pocket rather than actually brought me any income. And I never really got back to it after that, because by the time like the COVID restrictions were over, I moved on to doing other things. But I still do teach it. I've got a once a month class that I teach now, and I teach at a festival that I go to, and I still love it.
Yeah, excellent. So what did you move on to then after yoga? Is that what you're doing now? Your recovery coaching?
Well, partly. I was a copywriter. I still do a little bit of copywriting for a while, but I became a copywriter because one of the things that I learned in my in my journey, my whole journey of recovery, is that I love to write. And I thought, well, I love to write. I'd like to earn money through my writing. So maybe being a copywriter is the answer. So I do some of that, but it's not it doesn't excite me the way that talking about being sober does. It's great, and I do enjoy writing, and I do enjoy writing good copy for people, but it doesn't excite me and fill me with joy the way that I'm now trained as a recovery coach and an embodiment coach as well. So I bring the two together, which kind of throw back to the yoga really. So I'm still doing a little bit of copywriting, but my focus is on recovery coaching now, and helping people to discover how much fun they can have in sobriety.
Excellent. I mean, that's a really good heart-driven purpose, isn't it, to what you're doing now? But so how does the recovery coaching work then? How, if somebody approaches you, is it typically because they know that they're drinking too much, or?
Yeah, well, I generally prefer to work with, so I mean, somebody who's, I wouldn't be able to work with somebody who's in need of medical assistance with their recovery. So I'm not, if you're at that level, then I can't help you until you've done all the detox and all the medical stuff. But yes, it would be, so if you were looking for support, and it can be at any stage of your recovery. It could be somebody who's looking to stop drinking or choose sobriety now, but it might be that you could be years down the line and still benefit from working with a recovery coach, because a recovery coach, it's about helping you to create the life that you want to live in recovery, wherever that is, whatever that looks like. I know people who've been like 10 years in recovery who are still working with recovery coaches, because for somebody in later recovery, they've got different issues and different challenges that aren't necessarily about staying away from alcohol. It might be about just wanting to work with a coach who understands where your life has been, that as somebody in recovery, you've got a different take on life than somebody who's not. And I mean, it might be that they want to work on recovery specific things, like it could be the well-being side of things. So maintaining recovery through well-being, through goal setting. So it's all part of, we're all in recovery for as long as we choose to identify as being in recovery. But where I like to work is kind of in that sober, curious, early sort of stages of it, because that's when people have the biggest discoveries about themselves, I think, and where you can get the biggest shifts in that self-awareness and ways of viewing the world as well. So I've got what I've created a kind of a program called the Peace Program. And so we look at purpose, and we look at energy, and we look at awareness, it's like self-awareness, emotional awareness. We look at connection, and we look at emotions. And I think if you can take care of those 5 things, wherever you are in your recovery, then you can, you can create a great life. I mean, I come back to these now with purpose and managing my energy and making sure that I'm in practicing self-awareness practices and making sure I'm connecting with the right people. I mean, like, I recently joined another sober community, which we are connected to. So, all the and emotions, emotions, they batter us all the time. So we always need to keep coming back to these 5 elements of life. I think that they are fundamental to a healthy life, really. And so I bring in a lot of mindfulness. There's some goal setting, but then the embodiment work comes into it as well, because we can work with the body to create that self-awareness, and also to change, so you can become more of who you want to be through different embodiment practices. Making sure that you're aware of your emotions, and you're aware of your triggers, and know that you know how to deal with it. There's lots in that program, and I'm very wary that this could turn into just a sales pitch for the program. So I don't want to. I get very excited when I talk about it.
I am interested in the. I've not heard of embodiment. I think in the way that you're talking about it. How do you bring embodiment into the coaching?
So embodiment is all about how we are now. So how you are in your body, because the mind and the body are connected. So if your mind is stressed, then that's coming out in the body, and your body will kind of tell you what your emotional state is. So when you start to become aware of it, your body, because your brain is constantly scanning your environment for threats and opportunities. So your subconscious will pick up on things around you before your conscious brain, that your conscious brain might not even recognize. And your body responds to that. So your body will tell you what is going on before your conscious brain picks up. I mean, have you ever, like, for example, has anybody ever said to you, take a deep breath, or drop your shoulders for a minute, and then you suddenly notice, oh, Jesus Christ, I haven't breathed for ages. I've been holding loads of tension here. Your body holds all this, and your conscious brain doesn't actually pick up on it until very often it's too late. So by becoming more in tune with your body, you notice these things a lot sooner. So I used to kind of walk around with my shoulders up like this all the time and barely breathing. I was so stressed all the time. But now my shoulders generally are down, and I notice when they're creeping up. And I'm more aware of that. So then when you're aware of what's going on in your body, you can take action before things build up into being big problems, rather than, there's, that thing of, you can have a really bad day with lots of little things happening all day. And then you get home and your child will drop something on the floor and you explode. And it's not the child dropping the thing on the floor that is actually causing the explosion. It's all the other things that have happened before that you haven't really noticed, that tension building up in you until It's like when you shake a bottle of pop and then you open the thing and it just there's too much pressure. So the more you can be aware of those things happening throughout your day, the more you can prevent those emotional outbursts. You can prevent those, because by the time we get to that point, you've got no chance of bringing any other coping strategies in. So, the more you can be aware of your emotions and develop coping strategies that are beneficial, you can avoid then that, I need a drink, because everything's too much and you can't think of anything else to do because you've just gone on your default operating system then. So there's loads to embodiment, and I should imagine that if Mark Walsh, who did the training that I did, heard me explaining that, he'd probably tell me off for waffling far too much. But in a nutshell, embodiment is how you are right now in your body, and there's a whole load of tools that you can use to develop that understanding and then to work with that and to improve how you are in any given moment.
Yeah. So I know that you recently celebrated 9 years of being sober. Congratulations.
I did, yes.
So how do you celebrate now? Often whenever we have a celebration in life, people turn to alcohol and a glass of champagne. So how do you choose to celebrate now that you're sober?
Well, for the last 2 years, and I don't know if it was before that, but I noticed in my Facebook memories, I did the same thing last year. I go to gigs. As you can say, I'm a bit of a sobriety rocks. So I go to gigs. So this year, I went. My anniversary was on the 12th. And on the 11th, I went to see a band called Ferocious Dog. And on the 13th, I went to see a band called Rusty Shackle. So I sandwiched my anniversary with 2 really good gigs, and I danced like a madwoman at both of them. So I tend to, I tend to enjoy live music a lot. I used to enjoy it before. I enjoy it even more now. I get to go to gigs sober. So yeah, and I normally write a big excitable social media post as well, telling about it, which I never thought I would do, but I really enjoy doing that. I really enjoy writing that, because it's so, it still amazes me that, 10 years ago, if I thought, if someone had said that I would be celebrating, not just 9 years sober, but I would be absolutely ecstatic about it and celebrating it and looking forward to the day when I can write that post on social media, I would have thought that's completely crazy. That sounds like a terrible way to live. But actually, it's just incredible, and it blows my mind, and I think it's such a thing to celebrate. It's a wonderful thing, and it's just, I think it's such a beautiful gift that I've managed to give to myself, that it's absolutely worth celebrating.
Oh no, it definitely is. So have you got big plans then for 10 years?
Oh, I'm sure that there will be something. I haven't thought about it yet, but I would imagine that if I can, I'll be celebrating by going to see a band. It would be, that's my favorite thing to do. It's, if I could plan the perfect night out, a perfect day would be going for a long walk somewhere beautiful and then going to see a band at the end of it. That's my kind of ideal day now, which is hilarious, but those 2 things give me joy. So I'll have to start petitioning to some of my favorite bands to actually play something that I can go to on the 12th of October next year. Campaign starts now. Or maybe I'll put on my own festival. Maybe I'll just do it myself. I'll put it on myself. I'll book them myself, and then I'm not at their mercy.
That sounds like a brilliant plan. So what we'll do is, for anyone that's interested in talking further to Esther about her work as a recovery coach, we'll put all of the links to your website and everything in the notes. Congratulations on 9 years. That is amazing. I can't wait to see what you're going to do to celebrate 10.
Well, you've just given me. I'm already thinking in my head now. I think it's going to be
epic. Whatever it is, it's got to be epic. So I think it's fantastic you've chosen sobriety for such a long time, and I can see that you're still really passionate about it. And it's been great connecting with you in the Sober Network as well.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for coming on today and talking about your experience and your stories from my drinking days.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun.
Thanks for listening, everybody, to Stories from My Drinking Days. My name's Harry. I'm from No Low Cocktails and Bars, and you've been listening to Esther Nagle. Thank you.